there support? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, review and discuss DD 43 and DD 9 excess funds and reimbursement.
Okay, I'm going to hold up the right folder. Gave you out some information. Again, 43 to 49 were projects, that were completed back in 21. Levy was put on, and what we found, what Rochelle brought to our attention was the fact that there were an incorrect projection of interest, warrant interest, so that the warrant interest on this project, if you go to the second page, there's a table there that you can take a look at. The warrant interest that was outstanding at the time of the levy is shown there in the first column. And the projected interest levy summary that was included as a recommendation for levy on the district is shown in the second column. So on the two district facilities, DD 9 main tile and the DD 43 main tile, there were waiver projections. Oh, that should be my... No, it's just dollar amounts there, so...
I can't believe you say that about me,
So the interest there that was basically levied out there, if you take the difference between those two columns, you'd be in the $137,000 range on DD 9, and you would be in the $53,500 range on DD 43 main tile. I did not catch it. At the time, Cole Budash was who prepared this. I should have caught it. It was an incorrect recommendation for warrant interest out there. Have not taken the time to call him and ask him why, but this is not something that would normally should be done, because all we're doing is trying to make sure we know the total cost at the time that the levy is going to be set. And the projection of additional interest down the road, well, that is an individual landowner's responsibility, in deciding if they're taking waivers, not taking waivers, or they're paying extra interest, all that kind of thing. That's basically their own private financing in a sense. So, what we have done, the question was raised to us as to what should be done with this excess. If you go to the first page, ISG has asked legal counsel, and this is a cost that we're paying for directly ourselves, is basically the front page there is a response from Brian Young, and then I had follow-up conversation with Brian Young. And if you look at this code section, I'll let you go ahead and read the code section first, and then we can discuss it. Okay, so basically you would have, if you go again back to the third page, if you just based upon the projected warrant interest that was included in the levy, you would see there that on Drainage District 9, we would expect that around the $107,000 and the $53,554. If you were not paying any of this back, you would have these large dollar reserves sitting there. These large dollar reserves, your auditors would probably ask the question, why do you have this kind of money sitting there? Okay, is there anything illegal about it? I'm talking to Brian Young, he said, no, there's nothing illegal about that, but if you were going to allocate any of the money back, the 50% is currently, there are some landowners that have taken the waiver, correct? Okay, so under this code section, they're basically saying you could only pay back 50% of the extra money, in a sense, that's been levied on the district until 100% of the levies were paid. Then you could decide down the road to pay back the other 50%, if you so wish, okay? The other option I'm just throwing out there, and I asked Brian about this, is on page 2 there, if you took that $137,000 and allocated it out to all the facilities of the district, I'm showing you what that reserve would look like on each one of the lateral tile facilities. And this is being weighted based on acres of each of those district facilities watersheds. Now, was this money paid through each one of those levies? No, it was not. But it was paid under the main open ditch schedule, our main tile schedule, so everybody helped pay for it on the tile systems. Okay, so I asked Brian this, and Brian says, well, the board would have the discretion to basically decide how they wanted to allocate and do the money situation. He said, yes, agreed that it wasn't paid through each one of the individual schedules, but it was paid by all the landowners inside of the watershed on the main tile. So he did not see there would be a true issue in allocating the dollars back. That we're just throwing out there for information for the board.
So do you need to wait until all the waiver period to see who ended up with what before you proceed with dispensing funds, or are we already through that?
That's already done. We already know who has waivers and who has been already assessed. So we would be able to follow that 50% rule right now until all the waivers have been paid, and then we could allocate the remaining 50. Did I understand that right?
That is correct. And so we know that over 50% of levies have been paid. So going with the 50% rule is something that you could decide to do. There is no big rush on this. I mean, you can decide when you want to do this. We're presenting this for information for the board to take under consideration. If you were asking a general recommendation for myself, I would say proceed with the 50%, and then I would reallocate reserves out from the remaining 50% and just put this to bed at this time. That would be my recommendation, but obviously the board needs to decide how they feel about it. Everything that you would see theoretically in these two tables attached would, in a sense, be in half, because you would be, if you're paying back 50% at this point. The process of paying back the 50%, I do also, so that you can see what that would look like. I'm going to hand out 43. And again, we understand that, this was an incorrect recommendation to the board. So we are looking to make sure that any legal costs and any of our time on this is not being billed to the district. It it's our responsibility to assist you in regard to correcting this. But if you, the first sheet there is showing you the levy summary that we had provided you. And if you look, I've handed out, did I hand out DD 9. So if you look down there, you see that warrant interest on the first page there, on this page. Down here shows that $149,000 of warrant interest. That is I printed out not the correct,
It's 43.
I gave you 43. Okay. 43 should be showing you the $71,745. Okay. What do I have attached to the next sheet behind that?
Some really small print.
The small print, but is it 43 at the top?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I do have that there. What I did is if you look at the top, there's 26,000. If you took 50% of the over interest of projected warrant interest of 53,500, the 26,750, I'm showing you on what was our levy calculator there, the amount of return that each one of the landowners would be receiving of that $26,750. So we can provide the auditor's office this spreadsheet and so that what it's taking is your percent of schedule column and just multiplying through of the dollar amount that would be decided to return. And basically, this would be the dollar spread basically to each one of the landowners.
And that was at 50%?
That's 50%.
Okay.
The 26,750 would be 50% of the over interest of 53,500.
And you can do that based off of the total 100% collection? Is that what you base the 50% on? Or just what is in there right now?
All I did was took the amount of excess warrant interest that we projected.
Okay.
This is just to give you input and example.
Okay.
We would want you guys to confirm what you're comfortable with in regard to the excess that you're looking to have. Okay? But it should be someplace in this ballpark.
So these could be cut as checks, or they would be stamped warrants?
These would be cut as checks back, because you got cash reserve,
Right.
basically, that you would have in the accounts.
So does that come to my office or the treasurer's office? When I asked Brian that, he didn't know for sure.
Well, obviously, the treasurer would be the one that, the treasurer is holding the reserves. So it has to be, the checks would have to be cut through the treasurer's office out of those drainage district funds.
And it doesn't matter, that some of this land that these people paid have been sold. We just still pay it to the landholder that paid it. I mean, hopefully nothing, I don't know how that works with estates and stuff like that, if it's closed or not, you know what I mean?
It would be paid back to whoever paid the levy. If the land was sold with the new landowner paying the levy, it's gonna be paid back to that individual landowner. So this list obviously has to be double checked, in regard to that.
I know that Van Lowe sold, but I don't know, I'm sure that, I just didn't know how the probates and estates, how that all works, if they got a check back. I know we don't have to pay interest back to these people, but
I also,
I certainly think 50% sent back to the landowners makes sense. I would have a hard time being convinced to do the reassessment of the remaining to all the laterals.
okay,
It's paid on the main, I think that'd be quite little where it should be. What's that? That would be quite little.
well, it's, yeah. So then in the future, you'll just make the decision if you're going to pay back the other 50%
Once all the waivers are paid.
once all the waivers are paid. So, that I'll leave to the board. You can review this, you can discuss with the treasurer's office as to, you know, the payback process. Obviously, this list needs to be verified against ownership of who paid levies, and then, we can provide you the spreadsheet. You can send us any name changes or whatever. We can provide you this spreadsheet so that you can rerun the dollar amounts and stuff to go back to. In that spreadsheet, I did the same thing for DD9, but obviously I printed the wrong one and stuff, so I can only provide you the 43 and stuff right now. So, additional questions from the board?
Go ahead, Jason. When you guys do this warrant interest, what do you do? Just figure at the beginning, just figure everybody's gonna take you,
What,
I mean, how do you?
the warrant interest that should have been figured is only the warrant interest during construction on outstanding warrants up until the time that the levy's gonna be made. He then took that and projected warrant interest out on the waiver.
Okay.
And he was using, we had a formula where we would do this just to give board's input as to how much additional interest in the future landowners are theoretically paying. And it's a rule of thumb as to, we basically say, on average, over 50%, basically in a 20-year waiver, that in 10 years, it's gonna probably be paid off. And that we do a projection just to come up with ballpark numbers. And it should not have been, it was done off to the side in the levy summary. I'm looking at the front page of the summary, did not verify, and it didn't stand out to me. It was a big project, $1 million type construction, and that interest amount never rang a bell with me and stuff, and the levy summary shouldn't have been put out with that much interest shown on it. So,
But we
I
can charge
apologize
for
for
our time now?
yeah.
Send a bill to ASU.
If you feel that is necessary, Phil, I guess.
You'll get
send it
back
to
one or the other, won't you?
Just send it after July 14th is what he said.
Yeah. But no, I do apologize. It should have been caught before the levy was made, but I will admit, I'm not perfect. Obviously, I missed the projection there. That should have been caught.
Not bad, the first mistake a couple months before you retire.
It's a heck of a way now, I have to say, I made a mistake. I will jump out of the chair unless there's any additional questions. What was the next item on the list? Pipeline. I will jump out and turn back over to Spencer.
No, I don't mind giving this money back as long as they don't use it to remodel the kitchen or something like that.
Oh, you be quiet.
I can help him.
Yep, okay, so what we're gonna hand out now are two different documents.
I did print those out for the board.
Oh, you have them already, perfect, awesome, great. Well, what these are prepared, by ISG as well as Brian Young. Brian could not call in today, so we're just gonna kind of talk these over a little bit. These are two separate, draft resolutions, and what they are based off of is, templates that were provided by the Iowa Drainage District Association, and then we made some wording modifications on some of the technical aspects, and then Brian had made some wording modifications on some of the legal aspects. And what these resolutions are resolutions by the Board of Supervisors as trustees of the drainage districts of Osceola County, for, basically laying out the requirements for any type of utility construction inside of drainage districts or drainage district easements. Now, the reason there are two separate documents here, the first one is for, the construction of a hazardous liquid pipeline, and the second one, which is shorter, is construction of, basically any other utilities, so pipelines or water lines, electric transmission lines, communication lines, service lines, other type things. So, the reason, the hazardous liquid pipeline separate document, those are, as I think we're all aware today, much larger encompassing projects that can cover a lot more area, would result in many different crossings, also result in a lot more administration and inspection needed, with that construction across drainage districts, something we have laid out in that hazardous pipeline, resolution, is that for an easement to be granted, to the utility by the drainage district, there would require review at the utility's expense, by the drainage engineer for separation distance between any tile lines and that utility. So, to try and explain that a little more clearly, if you've got, a 24-inch tile that's 100 years old, that's 4 feet deep, and they want to come across and put a pipeline underneath of it, okay, you want 2 foot of separation from that, that's fine now, but what happens in 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years when the landowner's petitioned for improvement, and now that 24-inch tile that's 4 foot deep, all of a sudden is going to be improved to a 42-inch tile that's 8 foot deep, and you've got a pipeline in the way. So, that's the idea behind, the sizing in there. That's something that was developed, Ivan developed during the Dakota Access Pipeline back in 2016, 2017 timeframe. So, the main points I want to just state with these resolutions, it is stated in here, and Brian had helped us with the wording, that any of the costs incurred by the drainage district for review of these applications is to be reimbursed by the utility. So if a utility company applies for one of these, and then there's review required, whether that's done internally or you were to have us review that for you, any of those costs incurred would all be directly reimbursable. And then the hazardous pipeline, we do also have an application fee shown in there, and that's, that's the crossing fee, and that's to cover any additional internal costs, current and future, for the county, and then if there was any excess funds from that crossing fee, that would be put back into that drainage district's account after that crossing. Couple other things just to state in there, it lays out all of the construction requirements so if a utility is going to be cutting an open ditch or a tile to construct a pipeline or whatever that may be, the construction requirements for that, their construction are laid out in there, as well as inspection of that, and how they would restore that tile line or that ditch. Additionally, any future work within the drainage district, so if there was a future conflict, it lays out that it's the requirement to accommodate the drainage district in the future. We're trying to avoid that, obviously, on the front end, but it does still state that in there. So, guess I've talked quite a bit about this here. I'll just pause briefly to see if the board's had a chance to look at them at all. Any thoughts? I don't think we'd be looking for any sort of approval today. I know Brian wanted a chance to talk with the board as well before we approved anything, but any thoughts on this?
If the board wants to legal questions, Brian is open to arranging a date to have a call-in to discuss with you any questions you would have. We thought Brian did an excellent job going through and doing updates. Again, we started working from the draft from the Iowa Drainage District Association, and he has, made a lot of changes that improved the language, in a sense, in the resolution. One past history thing, when we were working on these drafts were not available at the time when the DAPL pipeline was coming through. This resolution had to be developed with the assistance of the Iowa Drainage District Association. It just happened Calhoun County was one of the first ones in moving forward with a resolution. And one of the issues we ran into with the DAPL pipeline at that time was the separation distance. There was actually a lawsuit filed by DAPL Pipeline against Calhoun County over the separation issue. We were able to negotiate and resolve that issue in a couple months period. And then the other thing was in regard to the cost for any of the crossings and paying for this, the DAPL Pipeline did not want to do a direct reimbursement. They wanted a projected cost up front, and they paid it up front as a easement damage. And so at that time, things were done a little differently. My understanding is, Spencer, you're correct, that I'll let you talk about.
Yeah, worked with a few other counties on this, and also some counties that have, I know the pipeline, I think just barely crosses corner of your county, but some counties that have a lot of crossings, have, similar resolutions adopted, have been provided to the pipeline companies for the current proposed projects, and to my knowledge, there's not been a lot of pushback on this. It's all been received as very reasonable. Really, this document is meant to protect the drainage district's interest, long-term, as well as during the construction of utilities, so.
It's protecting all landowners in that district, because in the future, we don't want their drainage rights impaired by, getting a pipeline company in the future to lower their pipe to allow for you to improve a district facility. We know it's gonna be a battle. So this is trying to protect that right by getting them to lower their, put their hazardous pipeline in deep enough so that we don't have that issue, or hopefully avoid the majority of any issues with that in the future. In hazardous pipeline, why is it hazardous? Well, in this case, carbon dioxide is a gas that can be an issue. Obviously, that gas could, if there was leakage from that, could follow down through your tile systems. The DAPL pipeline was basically crude oil. That type of thing, if there was a rupture to the pipeline, could have easily been picked up by tile systems and transferred to waters of the state and everything. So there is potential hazards there that this is trying to make sure is being addressed with the separations and reconstruction issue. Obviously, a water line crossing a district tile line, rural water line going in, is not a hazard issue, and that's why the separate document for non-hazardous type crossings would just be a good resolution, standing resolution for all other utilities in your county, dealing with that as they come forward in your county.
I probably wasn't paying enough attention, I was doing too much reading. The difference in these two, this one is just a general,
So yeah, the shorter one, so the longer one includes
is for just,
hazardous pipeline, and it also includes, there's other sections of Iowa code specific
and
to
you guys,
hazardous
you
pipeline.
guys drew both of them up, or just the one?
Both of them, yep.
There was only one section I questioned, was the liability of $1 million per occurrence on the shortened version. Is that enough?
I don't think so.
It does state in bold print, further applicants shall legally be obligated to replace, repair, reimburse. I mean, it probably covers a little more than $1 million, but.
Yeah, I think if the board wanted to increase the liability.
This would be the general liability that the contractor would have. In most of your contracts yet, $1 million liability that the contractor has to provide is still kind of the norm out there.
Okay, I just asked.
But with inflation, that's not that much anymore.
Well, I understand, and if the board so wishes, yes. What did we have in the hazardous pipeline?
Well, you had quite a list there, but.
Yeah, they have, 10 million for loss on the hazardous pipeline.
So, where a a much higher risk of
Yeah.
issue.
Because it's a hazard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the general one, where you're talking water lines, fiber optic, electric, things like that, those are the lower.
If you so wish to go to 2 million, I do not think that any contractor is gonna have typically, or any utility company is gonna have any, issue in getting a $2 million, liability, coverage for that. So if you felt like it needed to be increased, I think a $2 million would be a reasonable change there.
Just a question, man, did you have, I apologize, I have something else to do, I should have, I'll do that,
You know,
I'd change it.
I have a question.
Yep.
You said the costs incurred are reimbursable to the drainage ditch, so if they put in a utility line or a hazardous pipeline or something, they do work, whose responsibility is it to go out there to determine what the damages to the drainage ditch was, to know what the cost to be reimbursed would be? And do we have to bill that then to the utility company, or how does the procedural part of it work?
So how we've handled the reimbursement process in the past is, you would have, if you had, say you had a large utility project with a bunch of different crossings, what we've seen counties do is set up, an account for that, and then you would have the crossing fee. So for the, hazardous pipeline, you have the crossing fee, so with them applying, their application associated with that would be, an amount of money that would be paid to the county for that, for their application. And then that could be held in there, and that would be a working fund to work out of. But you would, any cost that was incurred, by the county, whether it was through bills to have us inspect, any of their crossings or things like that, could all be sent on to the utility to be reimbursed. Our policy has been with these types of things that we would not expect payment until the county has received payment. So you would just basically forward our bill and then wait until you've been paid to then pay us for any of those costs.
So other counties do it out of the general fund, or they set up a separate fund, or?
I believe they set up a separate fund for it
They've been
to work.
typically from general dollars, but they were making a separate account so that they could track those dollars. And were basically, with the DAPL pipeline, there was an upfront payment for every district, and it was computed out per district by the number of crossings and a flat fee per crossing. And those dollars were put into, basically certain accounts so that they could track the dollars that were sitting there. And then as bills came in, our inspection bills were identified per district as to which crossings that we had basically been working with. I'd have to double check that now that I think about that. It seems to me we put all the money for all districts based upon our projection into one fund. Everything was paid out of that, and if there was monies left over, it was reallocated out to the districts based upon the number of crossings that they had, by the district.
Okay.
Do you know what county did it, so I can call them and see how?
Calhoun County
Yep.
would,
Buena Vista County had DAPL as well.
yeah, Buena Vista, Sac, and Calhoun, but Calhoun County would be the most knowledgeable to talk to.
So then the utility, do they hold like completion so that we know that all the work is done, or are you guys engaged in this, like, once we get, when they're just gonna do stuff? Is that when
So-
you guys come in?
Yeah, they are,
Okay,
basically how it would look generally is they would, and I would request, and it's my fault, I should have sent this to Keith, we can, look at this, but if there's a utility requesting work, then this would become an additional document that would be sent to them if they're working in drainage district right away.
oh,
And then
okay.
they would basically complete an application associated with this, and then if you receive that, you could send it to us for review if you'd like. And then part of the agreement states that they have to provide notice of construction so that, you can have, a representative there to inspect their work, whenever they're crossing, and then all those costs are reimbursable, so.
We worked for multiple years with Calhoun, Sac, and Buena Vista counties in this type of thing under the general, utility crossings. their drainage office handled the permit process. But then when it came for staking the district facility and doing a checkout after the crossing had occurred, those type of bills, we billed directly back to the district. And then the county drainage office billed the utility back for that. We had a general discussion with this going on a year ago about these resolutions, and then also about appointing ISG as the inspection for district crossings. ISG also, in a lot of counties, has been hired for the county inspection that the county engineering office typically has been put in charge of, but we've been hired to do the ongoing surface restoration work in a lot of the counties that these CO2 pipelines are looking to cross. So the resolution aspect, we had talked to the board earlier that you need to get the resolutions in place so that you have a document there when it comes to final negotiations with your, with the pipeline companies, that you have a document sitting that they can go to and say, yep, we agree to basically comply with your resolutions. So that's why this is coming forth now. Obviously, we don't think the approval of the pipelines are gonna possibly occur until this fall, at least, with the monies that have been spent, there's no doubt these things are gonna move forward.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a couple questions? In terms of the dollar amount for the liability, most of the impact is going to be at individual crossing damages and things like that. The million's probably adequate. If you do increase it substantially, you may price out some smaller contractors that do a lot of repair work and things like that for the utility companies. Not the big pipelines that are running a big giant project across the country.
Right.
But you're gonna price out your local contractors that do work for like rural water, say, and things like that. So I don't know if I would increase that. This is creating another layer of permitting authority over the top of right-of-way permitting, which is where a lot of this work occurs.
Right.
I mean, obviously, the pipeline, they're getting easements and they're outside the right-of-way. Do the drainage districts predate the statehood establishment of right-of-way, or which one came first, rights-of-ways or the drainage districts?
The drainage code under 468 states that they take precedence over. The drainage code was established in the early 1900s and then reworked in the 40s and early 50s. But the drainage code basically gives drainage the first rights of any.
So you're saying secondary roads would have to get these drainage permits to do any work that we do in drainage districts for any maintenance that we do in the right-of-way now?
If it was affecting a drainage ditch facility, so I can't imagine where you would be if there was a tile, I suppose if you were doing the tile line work with the facility. But I think this is construction of a new utility over, across, or beneath drainage district infrastructure. So I guess I would say no, based
So
on.
not maintenance of it, correct?
No, your maintenance of, you're talking maintenance of.
Oh, we're getting ready to replace a bridge, there may be tiles that tie into the ditch near the bridge.
That would not be a utility crossing. It would be basically a shared right-of-way between secondary roads and the drainage district. And that obviously just becomes a construction project, so there would not be a permitting process, for secondary roads. Now, you can have, a lot of times you get asked to allow in your
So yeah, what we've seen in a lot of other counties is what Ivan just described, the county's engineer's office, because they're often receiving these requests for working right away, will be familiar with these, but then realistically, you would not have to,
You inform them as part of the right of way.
that it's required as well, that you to do this, and that you would not, yeah. Most counties have not had the county engineer handle that permitting process as well as the inspection of the crossings, but you'd be aware of it, I guess, so.
This is meant for new pipeline or new routes alignments, not necessarily repair work of existing, or?
Correct, this would have applications for, a new utility installation. Drainage, the 468-186 is the section on utilities, that states that, as Ivan had mentioned, that the drainage district facilities have precedence over any other utilities as well, but when you don't have this sort of thing in place, it becomes often more of a challenge to get them to move their utility to accommodate the drainage district.
Pocahontas County has had a utility crossing, policy in place probably for, I'm gonna say 30 years now and stuff. Other counties, we worked with Calhoun, Sac, and Buena Vista County for establishing general utility crossing policies in those counties. It's just good because there's, with rural water and all these other utilities, electrical utilities and stuff out there, there's a lot of times where a district facility was getting crossed, and then it becomes, you know, did they cross, or should they have been notified that they're gonna cross?
Rural water just did a pipeline extension to the lakes through, from Ochean out through the Allison Township. I'm assuming that crossed multiple drainage districts.
Probably would have, and,
And
so,
I have seen on construction projects before where we dig up a tile in a road ditch and there was a communications line bored right through the middle of it. I mean, I've seen that unfortunately happen before, so having something like this in place at least requires them to take a look and to say, okay, what are we crossing and what do we need to be prepared to bore underneath?
and the hazardous is just pushing for other counties that now are gonna have dealings with the hazardous. Let's take care of both issues here and get the resolutions in place so that you can handle these in the future. Again, we're not looking for a direct action, we'd like the board to review if you got legal questions, but we would need the board to set a date to approve these resolutions.
Before we do that, I guess the last item I had, on the hazardous pipeline resolution, there is a crossing fee associated. I just threw a placeholder of 10,000 in there. I think a lot of counties are doing something in the $7,000 to $10,000 fee range. Don't know if the board has any thoughts or, input on that. Seeing, that 7,000 to 10,000 be very reasonable, more than enough to cover any costs, that would be incurred in the future. There is, my understanding from talking with Brian as well as some other attorneys worked with, you can't just set the price at whatever you wanna set it at, right? There has to be, the wording I put is reasonable recovery of those dollars, so it has to be something reasonable. Something in that 7,000 to 10,000 range, I feel would be reasonable, on there, so.
No, Iowa State Association of Counties and ISU are doing a construction in wet conditions
Yeah.
study, basically. Is there a place to include that? Obviously, we have restoration, but
Yeah.
you can avoid creating the problem to restore. Is that worth citing or including, or do we, amend this later to include it, or?
So the good news is, that the study is kind of specific to the, or, general to the construction across the county and the land restoration. Unfortunately, that would be code, I think that's 199, chapter 9, that's the, construction requirements for hazardous liquid pipeline. There's not a lot of specific information in there now, as you're aware, about when we as inspectors can stop the contractor from working due to wet conditions, so that's what we're hoping to do in there. We did include, being in drainage districts, you as trustees have the right to kind of set your own policy, I guess. So those policies or those state laws don't necessarily apply to the drainage districts, because you can set your own policy for the drainage districts. So we have put wording in here about that they are, required to get approval from the drainage engineer prior to work, so we would have discretion discretion as to when the conditions are fit for them to do the crossing work in the drainage district.
So any of the restoration work for the general installation of the pipe still comes under the utility board.
Yep.
And, the utility board requires them to file a restoration plan, and then the counties that hire a firm to do the ongoing restoration inspection, we're using that restoration plan as the guidelines, in moving forward. Now, every county, can negotiate something in addition to the, restoration plan from the state, but there's some limitations, and I don't know all that aspect, but
Yeah, I actually just met with, some folks yesterday on that, and that's, the intent is to try to get some of those things rolled into the, restoration plans for those projects. But I guess to get back on track, in terms of the drainage districts, there is language in there that would, basically require them to only work when we were, gave them discretion, based on our discretion, based on the conditions, so.
any of the, what we're hearing again from counties that have had discussions with the CO2 pipelines companies, they are much more open and accepting of this type of thing than what we ran into. The DAPL pipeline had not crossed a state with a multitude of drainage district facilities, and there was quite a bit of upfront battle issues over what was going to be acceptable.
Ready for the next time?
Yeah.
Okay, just before we move on, I guess, question, does the board wish for us to set up according with Rochelle and Brian Young, to set up a date to approve the policy? Yep.
That would hurt.
Okay. And in terms of crossing fee, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
I'm fine with whatever.
Okay. Okay. We'll coordinate with Rochelle and Brian Young to get something on the schedule, to take action on that, so. Okay, what did you have next on your list?
Drainage open ditch right away.
Oh, yep, okay, so this one, this was, work we had completed for Sharon in the assessor's office, with the drainage district open ditches. We have a couple of the ditches we've done projects on so far, so DD 43 and now DD 64 and 65. As part of those projects, we had, developed open ditch right-of-way for those and had right-of-way acquisition and provided her with the right-of-way shapes. She had requested that we develop right-of-way shapes, for all the other ditches in the county for existing right-of-way, for all the other drainage ditches across the county, so that she could remove all those from the tax rolls, as well as the, right-of-way for the ditches we've done reports on. So we did that, we researched, all of the existing right-of-way for all the other districts. Generally, a lot of them did not have much of a record of right-of-way. So what was taken was basically the open ditch right-of-way, the top of bank to top of bank, so the actual land taken for the open ditch was what was removed for, right-of-way from assessment, for those districts. And I believe that was done and updated in the GIS, software, and the taxes were adjusted accordingly for all those. So that was completed for all of the drainage districts with open ditches in the county, and that establishes, for the drainage ditches, the length of the drainage ditch, so where it starts and ends, and we again base that on the historical plats, as well as the width of the right-of-way, through each section, and then the associated acres of right-of-way, with that. So that work was completed, we had done that. What we would recommend, we had talked about this, it's been quite a while back. I know when Ivan originally had talked with you about this, about a year ago, but, what we discussed as the next step is, what we'd recommend is actually getting a record of that right-of-way, for each of those drainage districts that don't have it. So right now, there is no record of right-of-way in any of the historical records for any of those ditches, for what the width of the right-of-way is for the ditch that was taken. So the recommendation we had, made originally, and we're suggesting again is to prepare, just right-of-way plats for those districts, so it would just be a plat along the length of the ditch that would show for each parcel, the width of the ditch right-of-way, as well as the acres, and those acres are just based on what Sharon had removed, from the tax rolls, for each parcel.
And once, the next step beyond that would be dealing with the assessment schedules about, because your assessment schedules aren't gonna have your acres of right-of-way also in there and taken off of the drainage
Benefited.
tax, to the given landowners. Obviously, those adjustments would also affect county secondary road, because any incorrect statement. I'm confusing an issue there, that would be incorrect. Those acres would just basically come out of assessment, and, the overall dollar amount of the schedules would be reduced by removal of those acres in assessment. Now, that process, the first stage to make that easier would be getting the plats prepared so that you have a drainage plat to reference in regard to adjustments to the assessment schedules.
And again, establishing the record of right-of-way, for each of those districts, now that that's been taken out of the tax rolls. So I did just go through and look with all the ditches we completed for everything in the county, obviously excluding DD 43 and DD 64 and 65, since we've already done right-of-way on those, it'd be around 55 plats, estimating that would cost us around $100 to $150 a plat to do, so be looking at around $7,000 to do all those. And if you wanted to assess those costs back to those districts, based on however many plats each district had, you could do that. But that was kind of the next step we would suggest, just to have that record of right-of-way for the ditches in the county, and then be able to make those adjustments to the assessment schedules, since there is really no record of right-of-way for any of those ditches in any of the current historical records.
What do you guys think?
Should probably update it.
You guys divvying the time and the cost to do this up based upon the districts that are affected, or
So yeah, I would suggest
be
we
paid
can,
by the districts, or?
we can, we would just bill it, but then we can provide the split for like all the districts, in terms of like this district had 20 plats, so they should pay X amount of the cost, and that's how, we can provide that. But that's how I would suggest it
Yeah,
was done.
it'd be billed under one project number, and then we would,
Where's the breakdown?
Yeah, we can provide the breakdown for it, yeah.
So is this the right-of-way for each, like lateral and branch too, or just the main open ditch?
If there were any lateral or branch ditches, but it's just open ditches, so, yeah, any like tile don't technically have right of way, they just have easement, so they would not have any right of way, but any open ditch in the county, this is, yeah.
Okay, what do you guys think? We should do it, or?
I'd make a motion to go ahead.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? What about the actual out boundaries of the drainage districts, especially if we're gonna start worrying about permitting in these districts?
Yeah.
Do we have those shape files, or can those be turned over to us?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I was gonna say, as part of this, this is all kind of an effort of all the drainage districts in the county getting some of these updated. I know at one time Cole had provided, a plat of the districts across the county, but we've gone through and done some cleanup with this right-of-way work of some of those boundaries and all that. We'd be glad to provide that, and we can, throw that in with this as well.
What were you referencing?
The actual out boundary shape file
shape
of
of the
the
entire
district
district.
on Beacon,
Yeah.
it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, and we can provide the shape files too. We start with basically what's available from the state data, and then we've obviously corrected that for districts we've worked in, and yeah, we'd be glad to provide that if you want to get it on Beacon.
Okay, we have a motion to go ahead with this. Do we have support?
I'll support that.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, discuss potential Osceola County Drainage District wetland mitigation policy.
Okay, this is one more item. Ivan, did you have, a couple of those printed out?
copies, I'm just, gonna send, we could make more, sure, that'd be great.
You have one?
We probably need, six additional. Okay, you wanna take a short break while those are being made?
We've got another 11 o'clock, so.
Okay.
We'll keep it moving. I'll just briefly talk through this with the board. This is something, if you remember our discussion previously on the wetland permitting issues on the joint district with Dickinson County. Some counties with drainage districts, I shouldn't say some, I'd say probably most counties with a lot of drainage districts have adopted a policy for the wetland issue with wetland mitigation. Where this comes into play is if a drainage district is doing a project and there is a wetland on an individual landowner's farm that's affected by the project, they would either have to, pay the cost for mitigation to mitigate that wetland, or they would lose their, farm bill essentially, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right, they could be kicked out of the, FSA program,
Yeah.
farm program.
so where this kind of comes into play is with a drainage district doing a project, and, the board as trustees is, required to proceed with, any of these improvements or repairs that are, I guess it wouldn't be affected by a repair, but an improvement if it was approved. Some of these counties like to have a policy, on file for when these issues come up, so that if a landowner does have mitigation that they have to do, there's a chance for something in writing for the board, to have a policy for the district will pay for part of the mitigation to help that landowner, or some of it, or all of it, or none of it. To be honest, every county is a little different on their policy. What I think Ivan has provided here is Calhoun County's policy that they approved. And this is again, just laying out, what some of those recommendations are for, farmed wetlands that would exist within a drainage district, during an improvement process. And I think theirs is a 50%, the district would pay up to 50% of the mitigation costs, for that wetland mitigation. So, I'll let you elaborate a little, Ivan.
Sure, about 5 years ago, we discussed this in the house here a little bit, and we were given authorization to work with, at that time, before Brian Young, Jim Kramer, and that was right before Jim had health issues and dropped out of the picture. So this never proceeded forward with anything, and so we're basically bringing it back to you again to basically for consideration. The front sheet there, drainage district wetland policy, some of the things that have to be thought about is, are you in a situation for that drainage project is gonna traverse an actual, wetland or farm wetland? And so that the rest of the project can't proceed necessarily without addressing that mitigation. So if it's not a non-traverse wetland or farm wetland, yes, that wetland may be affected by the improvement that the district's doing, but can be avoided by the orificing down the lateral, serving the wetland, those type of things. So that's what we're showing on the front here is just some of the considerations that may not all be included in the policy that was written by Calhoun County at that time. One of the things that typically a lot of counties had gotten to is the landowner that has the true wetland or farm wetland is receiving the greatest of benefit from the mitigation process because he's able to improve his drainage and he has to do the mitigation to stay active in the farm bill. As long as it's not a core or a jurisdictional wetland under the core, we're just dealing with FSA in regard to the farm bill. So in that process, typically, a lot of the counties were saying the landowner at a minimum is gonna cover 50% of the cost of mitigation. noticed that that is part of what's talked about in here. All we would be asking today would be is the board, because we know that some of this discussion was an issue being discussed with Joint Drainage District 3, we recommending that this be brought forward again with the board, and that you start looking to establish a resolution on wetland mitigation, and basically would be authorizing ISG to proceed with legal counsel in preparing a draft resolution for wetland mitigation.
I'll make that motion.
What funds are get used to pay this? It's the benefit of all districts, but many of the districts have no activity, and how do we really say it's a benefit to them? Non-district owners would have no interest, limited interest in it, beyond environmental impact. That's big piece.
The resolution itself, the development of the resolution, again, that's, obviously comes back to the board. I would think this would be something that potentially you would just pay through general fund. It's probably not gonna be big enough dollars that going through split to multiple, districts. This includes both open ditch districts and tile districts, because obviously this issue is involved, more involved with tile districts than it will be the open ditch districts. So, my recommendation would be is the board to consider just pay it through general funds, to establish, a wetland policy.
Okay. We ready for a motion?
Ed made the motion, just have to have a second.
Oh, okay. And for support?
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, passes. Discuss DD5 O'Brien County.
Okay, I think this is the last thing, I'll just let Ivan touch on this, I know it was brought up at the hearing, last month, so.
Okay, when we were having a hearing on Joint Drainage District 38 and 39, it was brought up by a landowner there that, there's lands in Osceola County that were annexed into Drainage District 5 in O'Brien County, but that there was no, procedural things of forming a joint board between O'Brien and Osceola County. Just again, to clarify, under the code, it basically says that once you do, there is the county cannot, Osceola could annex into O'Brien County just like what we did on 38. And basically, O'Brien County cannot prevent that annexation, and automatically, by the fact that you cross, the code requires that you become a joint district with the board, a joint board, basically having the authority of management of that given joint district.
Well, that would have made things easier.
So those are, and it was discussed there at the hearing that, this is exactly what we did in 38. And so we notified the board down there that the annexation was gonna proceed, and that basically, this is going to become a joint district. So, when the landowner was speaking to the fact that, Spencer made the comment that.
It was.
Oh, I'm just gonna say, but, later, when we were
yeah.
discussing this, he said, you're getting taxation without representation. And in a sense, that's truly what was taking place. Is there any formal proceedings that would have to take place for this? probably not, just communication between the boards, so that basically the boards start functioning as a joint board, and the district of DD five, I don't know how many different facilities, haven't investigated any of that, but the main open ditch appears to be the issue, that these lands were annexed into the district for the open ditch down there, and not to muddy the waters a whole lot, but, again, what you have is a natural ditch in between the outlet of 38 and the beginning of Drainage District 5, you got a natural channel. Now, you had lands that were annexed. I don't know what the actual benefit, theoretically, proven benefit to the lands in Osceola County were, since they were draining, obviously potentially through a natural channel, or if they outlet it directly to
That
Pine.
was the issue when we discussed this, and that was the same thing we had with Dickinson, was being able to prove benefit, which they couldn't do, and Rick Hopper did both of those. So I don't know if there was any proven benefit to Osceola landowners.
Okay.
Isn't
Now,
there a mile yet that isn't cleaned out?
That's what he's saying, there's a natural channel
Channel.
between, yeah.
and one of the landowners spoke to the fact of asking for that natural channel. Now, that being a natural channel, automatically, is going to be waters of the United States. Any straightening, improvements to that channel is under jurisdiction of the Corps in 404. So there's all kinds of issues that come into play if we were dealing with that segment of the channel. All I'm bringing to the board is that there should probably be communication with O'Brien County, that with the fact that there is annexation that was done, landowners did have, under annexation, there is truly no objection, remonstrance rights, I should say. You got objection rights, and those landowners probably needed to initiate their objection rights if they didn't feel like they were getting direct benefit. But the fact that it wasn't being dealt with like a joint board, there's a little bit of that issue that comes into play here too. So, at a minimum, I would encourage basically some communications with Bryan County in regard to that district, and the fact that with the annexation, at a minimum, there should be joint board in dealing with actions on the main open ditch of DD 5.
What code section is that that sets up the joint district?
There is a full section, part 1. I should have wrote this down.
We can, send
I
it to
can,
you. I know when we had, for 38, we had Brian Young review that, so I can take a look at the letter that you provided him.
Is there any recourse, Ivan, for those guys that are getting assessed? I mean, they get assessed through O'Brien County, right, Michelle? No?
No, through our county, and then we collect the money and then we send it to O'Brien County.
Yeah, that's what
Oh, yeah,
that's what I
sorry.
mean.
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
there's no recourse for those guys that are getting,
Well, that's where the recourse comes back to, at least by a joint board, you have,
no, I get that, but.
But we voted to approve those levies.
Yeah, if they were approved here, theoretically, it was brought to this board to act on the levies. So there was action by this board that you were approving a levy in Osceola County. Why I can't find that quote section, but I can send that to you. But, in general, there's a whole section in inter-county drainage districts in the code that discuss that issue. But is there any recourse? No, I mean, if those levies are being approved here, through here, and automatically approved, and payment is being made and sent down to them, there's probably no recourse at this stage of the game.
What if they can prove no benefit?
Again, we're gonna have to get into, that would become into a legal question. There was hearing, there was, notice and hearing, as long as they can show that, O'Brien County can show that, and there was no appeal outside of that. I think probably possibly dead end on that side of things. I know you got other work.
Yep.
That's, I think, everything that we had wanted covered.
Blocking out some time for us this morning, I appreciate it.
All the time?
All the time, the whole meeting, yep.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you, appreciate it.
You'll be seeing this face on a more regular basis, and you will not be seeing this face on a regular basis.
Thanks for all your help.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Item 468, 141. That be Brian?
Is that the inter-county?
Some districts on inter-county districts.
Well, there'd be some there, but there's a whole separate, portion of the code that talks about inter-county drainage. Yeah. And I had just looked up a week or so ago, I had looked up the code section. 270.
I'm just happy to
270,
work, I'm
okay.
a little scared. I can get this out of here.
Yeah, part one, inter-county drainage levy
We'll call you
districts.
when we check.
There's some pricey ones.
So,
There's some pricey ones in there,
Okay.
the 2 loaders.
Well, sir, can you hear me okay, maybe?
Rochelle, can you hear me or see me?
I can you hear me?
thank you.
See you guys.
Can
We'll
you
call
hear
you if we
me,
need you.
Maggie?
Last night.
Maggie?
I could, I would, but I can't.
But I can screw it up pretty easy.
Is there a mute button somewhere that you're muted?
Yeah, I don't see any volume stuff.
Yeah, under Maggie's face.
Rochelle, into a chat.
Underwear, oh, under audit here.
Yep.
Maggie's picture, the bottom left, red button.
Audio. Let's see what else I'm missing. And I'm gonna have to recall.
What's that one right beside the line to it?
Let's start video.
Mike, just shut up.
What?
Just shut up.
Oh, I got her number, I'll try calling her and see if it goes, I don't know. I'm so techy, you know.
Maybe Ed can figure it out.
I had my kid along, I'm trying.
If I had my 4-year-old granddaughter, I probably could.
I can get it to work by,
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. You are in the meeting now. There are 2 participants in the meeting. You have been added to the waiting room.
Maggie, can you?
whoa.
I just,
Muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star. The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press
Okay,
star
I'm
six
muted
to
because I'm
unmute.
getting some feedback, but what I did is I muted your Zoom, the pictured one, but the phone, if you wanna unmute yourself.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press star six to unmute. You are unmuted.
There, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
You are muted.
Okay, can you hear us now, maybe? Maybe we should just shut that off and just do the phone.
Rochelle, you just want me to call into your boardroom? I can do that, assume that would work.
Well, I can hear you now, maybe I'll just shut off. What?
I don't know if
She's
she
not
can hear
hearing
you.
She can't hear you.
Okay.
You can hear her.
I just shut that off, call him.
We should just leave it, we can just leave it.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You are unmuted.
Okay, maybe.
Okay,
Can
is
you
that-
hear us? Yeah, we'll just talk you through the phone. They have the printouts of what you sent, so I gave them a copy of all of that. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I know it's very difficult to get all this working. So yeah, I completely understand. I'm Maggie Berger with Spear Financial, everyone. We've worked together in the past on a couple of loans. We are a financial advisor or a municipal advisor. And we've started to provide some projected information to the county, on what could potentially be a borrowing for a jail project. When we did have a conversation with, Allard and Cooney, who would be the bonding attorney acting on your behalf, Jason Comiskey. More or less, to do a jail project, you're going to need to have a referendum, a vote of the people. Just quickly, that does require passage by 60%. So it is a supermajority to pass that. And I believe Jason was gonna confirm some dates but Rochelle, being the county auditor, she obviously knows the dates that you can put that, up for a vote. She also then would know the information as how many days in advance, the county would need to pass the resolution stating that they were wanting to move forward, with that referendum. But the bond attorney will write the referendum language because we want to make sure that it is properly written according to what the Iowa Code section allows you to borrow for under general obligation bonds. They also do a great job of asking, are you gonna do, demolition of an existing facility? Are you gonna do equipping of the new facility? Are you gonna do things like, parking lots and stuff like that? So they make sure that everything is included, so you have all of your bases covered when you go ahead and borrow money. We ran for you some different scenarios. What we did, we used a 20-year maturity on all of our scenarios. We ran them over what we call level debt, meaning that debt service annually is approximately the same amount. It's within $3,000 to $5,000 of itself every single year. We also ran these in $500,000 increments. So we started at $3 million, then we went to a 3.5, a 4, a 4.5, and 5 million. So from a perspective that really to increase the size of the borrowing, each time this is, you would have to, this is what we're talking about for a debt service amount. We also ran these at an interest rate of 4.5%. We believe that the interest rates are probably headed in the downward fashion a little bit. We hope to see them head downward. Right now, we're in about a 4.5 to a 5% range. So we really thought that, putting these at a 4.5, they could actually come in a little bit less, depending on, when you would pass this as a referendum, you would go out and actually do the borrowing. And with that being said, you would only do the borrowing once you had the bid in hand and you were ready to proceed forward with that bid. In the past, sometimes, we've done borrowing where, we're like, oh, let's just get the borrowing done, we're gonna put out the bid. Your taxable valuation is that yellow column that's sort of towards the far right of the sheet. That is the valuation that you can levy against in the debt service of the county. So that $652 million represents taxable valuation. You can see that we did not put a growth rate in there, so we did not assume any growth in that taxable valuation. As the valuation does grow in the future, you would see that there would be a lessening of the impact on the tax rate, because your valuation, red, that debt service over green valuation. The green column is estimated tax rate. It's $1,000, per $1,000 of value. So on the $3 million debt service, you can see that the estimated tax rate over a level debt period is 35 cents. So, if you levy nothing in the debt service right now, you would add 35 cents. So 35 cents added to your overall taxation of the county. The debt service doesn't have a limitation on what you can levy. It is limited only to what you have borrowed in debt. But there's no other limitation. There's no, 350 back. The far right column in blue says that if I own a home within your county that's assessed at $100,000, I could then have the rollback of 54.6501%, so I only pay taxes on $54,000 worth of value. That 35 cents increase in the debt service would equate to about $19.30 on average. So I would assume that if I live in your county, you issued $3 million, it was at 4.5%. The tax rate was 35 cents a thousand. You would be looking at about $19.30 of increase if I lived in that $100,000 house. Simply, if I lived in a $200,000 house, we just double that $19, and that $19 now on my $200,000 house becomes $38.60. So it's pretty simple math. We have done for some community colleges that kind of scan not only residential, commercial, industrial, and some ag-land. We've done some projections where we can kind of throw this in. What I'd like to do, so we don't confuse, is if the county wants to pick one or two of the amounts of borrowing that I'm talking about, I'd be happy to update those so that you also can see kind of what that equates to from a commercial standpoint, from an industrial standpoint, from not only the residential as you'll see here, but also then from like an ag land standpoint. We've sort of kind of done some breakdowns before people are voting things in like this. So we'll sort of walk through this, but on your $3.5 million schedule, now the average in the green goes up to 41 cents. So we went from 35 cents down to 41, just borrowing a little bit more, so we're up about 6 cents. And now my $100,000 house probably would pay about $22 more in taxes, okay? We go to 4 million and 4.5 million, and those also go up by about 6 cents each time. So that green column just keeps getting a little bit bigger, and that's just because you're borrowing more debt. So it's going to take more tax levy rate for you to go ahead and to be able to pay that debt back. All of these schedules also assume that you have no other sources of revenue to pay the debt
we can't levy more than what our principal and interest is to pay it down sooner, is that right, with the debt service levy, or?
So interestingly enough, you can levy more than what the principal and interest is. So let's just say that you owe out a new, so let's look at the $5 million schedule. Let's just say that's our max. Let's say you go out and tell the voters, we're going to borrow somewhere up to $5 million, and you do have to put an amount on the ballot, and that's a not to exceed amount. But that's 59 cents, okay? So let's just say you go out and tell the voters, we're going to do a borrowing, and it will not cost you more than 60 cents a year, okay? So then, Rochelle, in that situation, you kind of scope it to the voters that it's not going to cost them more than 60 cents in additional taxes a year. That all equates to each and every homeowner, farm, ag, land, business, whatever that equates to in their taxes and their taxable valuation. But you're not going to levy more than 60 cents a year. As the valuation grows, let's say, and you only need 54 cents to service the levy, you actually can over levy. They call it surplus levy, and you could stockpile that money away. So if you recall, in the last 3 years, the Department of Management has actually added that line to your budget, right? You get to choose, is this for an actual debt or is this for a surplus on a debt that's already outstanding? And then what you do is that money that comes in has to sit in the debt service fund. You cannot use it for anything else at the county level. And then once you reach the optional redemption date, and on a 20-year bond, you're probably talking about 8 to 9 years out. So once you reach that optional redemption date, then you're able to call those bonds in for the money that you have. So if you've accumulated, maybe $500,000 of excess money at that time, or even $200,000, we start to go from the bottom maturity and work our way up. We start to say, well, we can pay off part of the 2044 maturity, and maybe we can pay off part of the 2043 maturity, so on. And once you hit that optional redemption date, every year when you over levy, you can use that money to call in another portion of the bonds. It's just until you hit the optional redemption date, you have to sit on that money because you cannot call bonds in. Bonds are investments, and so you just can't call them in immediately. There is a call feature, and the underwriters will know that investors are going to get to hold this investment and get paid up until that call or optional redemption date. And the decision is yours every year. And you may decide, we said we were not going to do more than 60 cents, and it's only going to cost us 53 cents. And the debt service fund this year, because it's grown in valuation, maybe the debt came in a little less than we anticipated, on interest rates. And you say, we're getting hit by insurance costs in another part of the county. We're really only going to levy 53 cents. You don't have to over levy every year. You only have to levy for enough to pay the debt. And so if one year you decide to over levy, and then the next year the budget gets a little tighter because of maybe a cost increase or something that's planned, and you say, well, we're not going to over levy this year, you can go back and over levy the third year, right? You can go back and next year and over levy. That's your decision each and every year once the debt is issued. The one thing that has to be levied is you have to levy for the debt payment every year, but you can choose to over levy or not each and every year as you go forward.
If we identified something in that column that says less annual revenue, you just said we have to levy our debt payment, that would be less anything we identify
Correct.
in that less annual
Correct.
revenue column, right?
Yeah, you say that. So if you look at that column that says less annual revenue, to the right of, the left of that is the total column, and so it's got the total amount. And then it would say estimated net debt service. So the way this worksheet works is that we take on the $5 million example, the total column says $385,000 principal and interest. The estimated net debt service is $385,000, but if you found, let's say, $85,000, we put that into that
every $500,000 sheet you ran, basically for every $10,000 we could identify as annual revenue, we'd be looking at 1.2% or 1.2 cents less on the estimated tax rate.
Let me go run really hop in there and tell you. I can usually just pop into the schedule and tell you. So tell me how much revenue you were thinking you could come up with, 10,000?
I'm just throwing the number 10,000, yeah.
So 10,000 took us down from 57, expanding out. We went from 6.34% or cents for not having any debt service levy to 57.37. So you're about 1.2, maybe even 1.3. We'll say cents, not percent, but cents that you would go down for every $10,000 that you would come up with.
So that's where I inject the idea on if we rebate and can find dollars through the donation approach that we can identify every year to help support this, that's 1.2 cents less per thousand that every taxpayer. And we need to remember that the urban renewal area has a debt service levy applied to it too. So even if they're getting a rebate, they still are on the hook for debt service levy. And exempt from that.
And even if we did 5 million, it would just be not to exceed 5 million. I mean, if it voted and passed, we don't have to borrow the full 5 million, it's just not to exceed, correct?
Absolutely, that's a very good point. It's just a not to exceed. It just means that you cannot go out and borrow more than 5 million. And I do want to remind you that there is cost of issuance. So we definitely, if you say, oh, you really are only going to need 4 million, let us run the cost of issuance because you've got legal, you've got, advisors, we have to have a rating, as we've done in the past, an investment rating. So there's going to be some cost of issuance that go along with that. So we definitely want to make sure that you are truly saying this is our not to exceed. Then again, we're going to wait until you actually get that bid in hand. And once you have that bid in hand, then we're going to know exactly, how much you're willing to borrow. And the not to exceed is, I think that you've identified some cash resources up front to help buy down the total and overall. But if you think there's any wiggle room in that kind of net amount, just based on, again, cost increases of product and supplies and this and that, I would aim a little bit higher on my total not to exceed amount and then always just come in and borrow less than what we think we're going to need.
Do you have a general percentage or rough number on what cost of issuance would be? Is it tied to the bond amount or?
Right. Yeah, it really is tied to the bond amount, but we typically say, you don't want, when you're looking, let's just even say it's 5 million, you're going to pay about 2% is the cost of issuance, and that's about 100,000. Now that 100,000, again, makes up bonding attorney, that makes up financial advisor, makes up the rating agency, registrar of paying agent in the first year, and the underwriter's discount. If you'll recall from your prior bond issuances, when we go out and sell these competitively, the underwriters will have the opportunity to take money out of the deal, meaning that they are willing to, they're going to take some money out because they've got to pay their sales staff. They've got work to do to resell the bond. That's kind of like an origination fee. So altogether, we say that's about 2%. So on $5 million, it's about $100,000. It'll be a little bit less than that, but we always aim at 2%. And again, usually comes in somewhere between 1.5 and 1.75. But 2% is our conservative estimate. And that's really what the industry uses. That's what the IRS expects. Cost of issuance to be at is right around 2%.
Any other questions?
I will say that we would be happy to, help the county in any way by giving them some additional, information that can distributed. You really can't tell them how to vote. You can tell them that the vote is coming up, and you can educate them and give them the proper information. So if there is a group in your community, that are not elected officials or county officials that you could depend on to kind of spearhead this and go out and talk, affirmatively about it, that's fantastic. We see that in school votes all the time, that there's kind of this blue ribbon group that goes out and really sells it to the general public. We can help out with the information, these types of numbers, and putting it in a better format that's easy to read. We could do a Zoom meeting, and depending on scheduling, and making sure that it's scheduled properly, we could always come up and do a daytime meeting or an evening meeting. If you were gonna have just a general meeting of the public to give information, maybe the architect was gonna say, this is what we're looking at building, and Spear could say, this is, based on the amount that you've chosen to put on your ballot, this is what, we think that will cost you for a borrowing perspective. We would be happy to do that. That's things that we do for all of these types of referendums. But now that the burden sort of falls on you guys to decide, what you think that not to exceed amount should be for that ballot, and if you're gonna, ultimately go forward, with putting this project on the ballot. So.
Okay, anything else?
Maggie, I had that conversation with you last week, and I kind of pitched my idea to the board here today. If we were to do urban renewal area rebate agreements, and entities indicated a willingness to do donations with a portion of that rebate at their choosing, if they donate something that would be a county budget issue, and we then diverted what would have been budgeted county dollars towards payment of the debt, is that workable or reasonable?
As you and I spoke, it's reasonable. You're not gonna be able to write any type of language about them or you forcing a donation on them in the urban renewal. There's nothing in the law that allows that. So, that would just be in good faith that you're giving them a rebate, and in good faith that they are saying they're gonna donate back to, something within the county. What it becomes is more of a budgetary question for the auditor, based on, can they divert money from a specific levy, to the debt service levy, or do they just levy that? Let's say, yes, conservation donation, right? Can you still levy for the conservation that you were intending to do, and then take that money that comes into the general fund of the county and transfer it into, buy down the debt service by $10,000 a year? Absolutely, you could do that. Should you do that if the money is not coming in, to fund another part, and you just want to use your, general fund every year? I would just caution you that if there's no money coming in to offset the use of the, the general fund dollars, to pay this back, that you would want to be careful. You don't want to bend down your general fund too far. I mean, part of that goes with your credit rating. Part of it is just safety and security of the county, that, you want to make sure that the general fund is there for emergencies. But ultimately, what your proposal is reasonable. You just can't be dependent on the donation in the rebate agreement. I do not believe, any bonding attorney would like that donation language, but that's what we had talked about last week, so.
Understandable. My thought towards that end is that we would have language in an agreement that the rebate could end at the county's sole discretion, rather than the language you usually have where mutually agreeable. So if it doesn't give us that freedom, then we wouldn't be interested in continuing that, I guess, was my thought. There may be other better ways to
Yeah, and I
approach
think
that.
that's just a conversation with the bonding attorney to work out if that is something that's possible. That definitely falls in their legal realm.
Hey, anything
Are there
else?
any other questions?
It doesn't sound like it. Anything else? Anything else?
All right.
Thank you, Maggie.
Well, I think, yeah, and thank you for letting me talk to you. Just let me know after some discussion here and over the next couple of weeks, what your thoughts are, and we can arrange phone calls with bonding attorneys, to discuss, setting up the ballot, things like that. Because I think probably your ballot issue is the next one, and Rochelle may be shaking her head, but I think, the ballot and timing of the ballot and getting that, into her office, even though you're the captain, you still have to get it passed and into the office. That is probably key here to putting this on the November election date.
Yep, we'll have to get that all just hashed out whenever the board decides how to proceed, so, sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bring Keith back up here.
Stop down, ask him to come up.
I see a note there, maybe I shouldn't, but
Yeah,
the motion on the siding was
Penny
not
said it doesn't,
understanding the bid correctly.
it does not have the gutters included in that bid from,
Then what,
I'd make a motion to reconsider the, bids for the siding on the ambulance garage.
I'll support that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else?
Then I'd move towards the other bidder if we're having to add things to an already a little bit higher bidder.
Support that motion.
Okay. All
and
in
then
favor?
what color are we going with here, so that we're all on the same page? Same with the color, I don't know what the
I
board
didn't know
wants.
we were picking it.
Well, she wants a tan or a gray, which is fine, but then
What color is it now?
it's white. And then she wants,
I think,
well, Steve Soul was in yesterday, wanted to know what color we wanted for the new shed. I said, well,
They both gotta be the same color.
yeah, that's why I'm asking.
but the doors are all white.
Then I'd white.
And the problem, yeah, it's one of the different color in my opinion, is that one bid did seem to say that it wasn't siding the office area.
That other one has the office area.
Okay, so who made that motion to go to the
I did.
other bid, and then who seconded that?
Ed did.
Okay.
But that's third.
So, we include
It says the office area, oh, sorry, siding, soffit fascia, bedroom lines. So it would be changed.
we just need to know what color. She was worried that, the new, or the existing one is all white doors, so just she didn't know if white would go very well.
I hate picking colors, so don't even want to, but I'm fine with white. I know there are people that
I am too.
like
I'm
that,
fine
but
with white.
I am too.
It's easy to
White.
clean.
Just keep it white.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll tell Steven to make the new shed white as well. Okay.
Doesn't fade,
That's right.
so once you start getting into colors, they start to fade out.
Okay. Don't want any issues down the road.
Are we here to discuss
Road closure.
well, that partly was me and Rochelle. Kent Smith from Stalkup Ag Service, he's the farm manager for, what was it, Orr?
Michael Owen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His issue, he wants to know what the difference is between, vacating and closing it. And what it boils down to, he was real good about it, he understood why we didn't wanna give it up. But he wants to plant to the center of the road. And it's already planted to the ditch.
We already got people farming the OB roads down to the center of the road that are already open.
And here's the the next question he had for us. Okay, so if you're not gonna let us farm to the middle of the road, then he wants it maintained.
Well, then that is back to what we were doing with it before, is level B road.
So that was just,
Because if you drive around all the level B roads we got down in Mason,
Yeah.
you go there by Chicken Man, some of those you can't get a truck through.
yeah, I got one right next to me.
So it's like, you're farming the right of way, you're farming the road.
The only other issue we had, and I was gonna look at it, and didn't look at it, was Rochelle. He said that part of the road goes into O'Brien County.
Yeah.
I think it's been, you may even know about it than I do. People use it when they shouldn't be using it.
Well, that's every level B road in the
Yeah.
county. You got people that said it's a fun place to go mudding with my 4x4 pickup every time it rains.
So
I get that a lot.
he wasn't upset, he understood why we did not wanna vacate it. But if we're not gonna vacate it, then he was back to, well, then maintain it.
It's a level B road. It only gets a pass.
So I don't know how much Keith knows about it or not, that's what I know about it.
On the road closure?
Yeah. Did you talk to,
I've not
Kent
spoken.
Smith? Kent Smith called me, he's from Stelcamp Ag Service, he's farm manager for the farmers along there. First he wanted to know what the difference between vacate and close was, and I said, well, vacate was, weren't gonna keep it, or, keep control of it, but we were just gonna close the road. And he wanted to plant, if we're not gonna maintain it, he wants to plant to the center of the road. And I told him, well, that's not what our intentions are, so. He said part of the road, Ed maybe knows, goes into O'Brien County.
Yeah.
Not very straight road then.
I know, I think the county attorneys have been talking for both counties, and they don't know how to proceed, because I think O'Brien County was okay with vacating it, and Osceola was okay with closing, so they don't know how to proceed.
And I just said, well, I'll bring it up at a board meeting, so.
Well, they can do what they want on their side of the road. I mean, it doesn't really affect what we do with our side of the road.
But does that mean he can plant to the center of the road then?
I can't plant to the center of the road on any of mine.
Oh, that's what he's asking.
So if he starts paying taxes to the center of the road, then I'm more inclined.
But anyway, I said I'd bring it up, so. He called Rochelle several times, and then Rochelle called me, so I called him.
And then the maintenance issue.
Yeah, and
It's a level B
he said if
road.
we didn't,
Level B, we don't spend a lot of maintenance on it, and it's one I think O'Brien deals with, not us.
okay. Do you want me to contact this guy back again, or, and what is, just gonna leave it like it is, or back to Rochelle's question?
I'd hate to give up our rights to the road.
Well, and he understood that, I told him that, I says, it cost us a lot of money to get back a rate that we gave away one time.
Yep.
I said, we just really don't wanna give up the rights to it, I said to him, and he understood that, but then he couldn't understand why we aren't gonna maintain it. I said, well, it's a dirt road, and he just said, well, people are driving down it, and,
So people do use it.
well,
Well, see, that was the excuse before, nobody used it, but now if you're saying everybody's still
Yeah.
going down it, it's just like, well,
I think it just boils down to they wanna farm it to the center of the road, that's what it boils down to. And I said, for right now, no.
I'd agree with that.
Your thoughts, Keith, any thoughts, or any good explanation I can give him?
It's more of a policy decision. I mean, if you decide you wanted to vacate it, we would live without it, but we don't spend a lot of effort on it.
Okay.
But if people are using it, he wants to plant to the middle, and they can drive over top.
And that happens from time to time, I see,
Yeah,
which,
yeah, it's life.
okay.
When we do go in and actually grade a level B road just for maintenance, we hit them every couple of years, then we get all kinds of complaints from people that we.
It is almost worse, to be honest with you. I go down every day there and check my cows.
Well, they want to plant on it, they want to plant right up to the track of where people drive. And if we go in there and do any kind of maintenance, we end up widening it back out some.
All right, well, I just said I'd bring it before the board, we discuss it again, I told him what our policy was, and why, and we'll go from there. And you said that O'Brien County usually does maintain that road?
They do more maintenance on it than we do.
Okay. All right. I'll pass the word along. Thank you, Keith.
Okay, approve resolution 52-22-23 drainage assessment.
Oh, I guess I keep one for me.
Yes, I need one of those.
And then,
This was a $25, oh, yeah,
yeah, $2,500 balance, yeah.
Well, if everybody has a chance to read it, I would take a motion.
I'll take a motion to approve resolution 52-23.
Support. We've got a motion and support. Jerry?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Leroy? Aye. Jason?
Aye.
And I will aye. Sign this one.
Yeah, that was fine.
Okay, claims. And there's one department that's running pretty heavy in this one.
It's a heavy one this time, that's for sure.
We won't mention secondary.
Claims 2094 and 2095 for Roswell Water Service.
We'll make a motion to approve those claims.
We've got a motion, do we have support?
Yeah, we'll support that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Just saying.
Interesting, I haven't that far yet. Okay. I'm just glad to see some equipment coming in.
We're gonna get the skid loader tomorrow.
Good.
Aside from the big tandem trucks, we've taken possession of all the other plated vehicles. So we just got the two loaders, skid loader tomorrow, so. Coming in good, a lot of equipment.
Good.
Got any place to store it?
Not as yet.
Stanton and Dunworth, was that
I was just looking at two.
2172?
Yeah, that's the sheriff's office, so they're not that close to their main account for 127.
It's in
Did
the
like,
main.
did like 9. They bought 9 Smith and Wesson in the Nesport for the deputies, $611 each.
$250,000 apiece for those payloads.
Heck of a deal.
Zach.
Who'd they buy the guns from?
Stanton, Dunworth, LLC, they're from Sylvan. I'm not sure who that was for.
any questions on the bills?
I'll make a motion to approve the rest of the claims.
We've got a motion to approve the rest of the claims, we have support.
I'll support that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now you don't have to use your own checkbook, make sure it's yours.
Still amazed at,
Right.
I'm still amazed at the payout on the equipment, not the plated vehicles, but the equipment payout. You know, the payout versus the age of the equipment that we're replacing and 100% cost.
How did they happen to go back on that tractor? How did you,
We didn't say anything, but we had mentioned to them that the reason why we were so well insured now was because of this tractor incident.
yeah?
And that adjuster went back and looked at that file and said, well, I think that you were not compensated appropriately on that one. She was a higher level,
We made that case.
We always work.
she was a higher level person that, because our claim now is in the millions, she's involved, where before it was a different level tiered person. So she, and then we just got the check today, actually, it's close to 30 grand. Like 28,000.
Where it should have been.
Around 28 grand or something like that.
Yeah.
The Bill's been working on that.
Bill's been after him for it too, you think? Michelle, that, purchase agreement last week, did you get?
We signed it right now.
Great, thank you. That was from last time.
Be nice if I could read somebody else's handwriting. Who did the donuts today?
Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon. One thing left on the agenda. Make a motion to adjourn. Motion? Support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?